Suffolk Pod Show is produced and managed by podtalk.co.uk. I'm Mark Mason.
And I'm Zanna Hornby.
Welcome to Podtalk, the podcast company, where we dive into the world of branded podcasts and explore how this powerful medium helps brands and talent tell their stories. Today, we have a special feature from West Suffolk Business Festival at the X-Labs West Suffolk College. We're excited to introduce our guest speaker, Zanna Hornby, a partner of Podtalk, who will be talking about the power of podcasts for brands and talent. Zanna is a leading voice in media and communications, and in this session, she'll unpack how podcasts can elevate brands, foster authentic connections, and provide a platform for talent to truly shine. Stay tuned for an insightful discussion on the growing influence of podcasting in the business world. So let's dive in. Here's Zanna.
It's really nice to be at this festival because I was saying to you earlier that it's 14 years ago when we first started it. I was working at the Berry Free Press and did the first one with James at the council. And was that with you as well? Yeah, it was. How amazing. So it felt like it's gone full circle and here we are. Warm welcome to podcasting and to Podtalk. Our company has been in existence for 4 years. Mark always wanted to work within the podcast space. I was pretty dubious. I didn't really know much about it. My background is publishing and media, and Mark's is sound producing. And the pandemic came and we were living in Malta, and we had a brilliant magazine called Temple Magazine, which was a high-end luxury 180-page beautiful magazine, which of course closed down almost immediately as all the advertisers pulled. And so we had to come up with some sort of, like so many of us did in the pandemic, with another thing to do. And Mark said, let's podcast. So we took all our clients from that magazine and interviewed them and created a really great podcast. One of the first in Malta, very exciting, completely new to the podcast world, but what a way to learn. We learned absolutely everything from recording, editing and producing to marketing, which is my background anyway, to sales and to understanding how podcasts are consumed, what the markets are, what people listen to, and how to get the best value out of a product as such. So that's where we started. Can I just ask, do you listen to podcasts ever? You do? Do you? Yeah, you mentioned that. Yes? Can I ask you what type of podcasts you listen to, if you don't mind sharing? Engineering? You listen to that for educational purposes, learning and what have you, for support, and that's great. There's some very inspirational podcasts. There's basically a podcast for nearly everything, is what I was trying to get to. How often do you listen? Do you listen regularly? When do you listen? Is that too personal to ask? In the car. First off in the morning. And can I ask how you listen to them? What platform you use to listen? Apple Podcast or Spotify? YouTube, Spotify. Yep. Okay. Great. So now I know a bit about you. I sort of want to make sure we're going to be talking about the right thing. So when we came back from Malta, we set up the Suffolk Pod Show, which was intended to be talking to influential people, entrepreneurs, business people. Yeah, Alex was one of our first guests on that particular podcast. And as we did it, we met so many other people. And these people started saying to us, my God, we love your podcast. We'd like one too, but we have no idea how to do it. We have no idea about the podcast space and how to create, how to promote, and how to start getting listeners. So we just put our heads together and we created Podtalk. And I'm going to give you a few stats. I just wanted to give you the interesting sides from a business perspective. Branded podcasts offer a unique platform for brands to captivate their audiences through spoken storytelling. There's a real joy of being able to listen and use your imagination. Have you ever listened to an audiobook? Right, exactly. So actually, they are pretty much the same thing. Unlike traditional communication channels, branded podcasts provide a far more intimate and personal experience. I'd hope you agree with that, than rather listening to something you're listening live on the radio, could be watching something on YouTube, is having that information in your ears and developing that personal relationship with the person who's talking, except for the AI, synthetic voice. So Edison here research of the biggest podcast research company in the world, and they have quite plainly said that podcasts have established themselves as the leading media platform in the UK now. It took a while to happen here, but it has finally done so. I mean, America, most podcast, do you know what the biggest podcast listening nation is? Have a guess. Huh? No. No. Good though. High. Say? No, but they're much higher than us too. That's funny. South Korea, and then United States, and then India. and UK about 14 in the list, to give you an average. South Korea, nearly something like 75% of people in Korea listen, South Korea that is, to podcasts. Talking from a business perspective again, that having a podcast for your business, when you listen to your engineering podcast, is it a specific engineering firm delivering that? Yeah. It's become really very important to build listeners and get clients is to build podcasts into your marketing strategies now. It never used to be. You just sort of run beside and go, yeah, we've got a podcast, this works kind of well. But now it's an absolute fundamental part. So the benefits are for anybody who's considering getting a podcast or running their own podcast. You might be a personality. I become recognized, I apologize. So build a loyal audience, help organizations connect with their audience on a personal level, what I'm just saying. Establish thought leadership. So if you're someone like you, Alex, who likes to do an awful lot of talking to an awful lot of people, and you go through quite a lot of conversations of thought leadership with people, it's a brilliant listening for people to enhance what you do and to position your business and yourself within the industry as a leader. Other benefits, reach a wider audience and build awareness for your organization's brand. There's a huge audience out there, the podcast. I'm going to talk about those stats in a minute. And it helps organizations create a consistent narrative talking about work that you do, whether it's charity, corporate, educational, whatever it is. Everyone's got that story to tell, and everyone needs to have that consistent narrative that is all around that storytelling I was talking about. Things have moved on so much in marketing now. It's not about those one-liners and the features and the benefits. It's telling that constant. It does bring additional revenue stream for organizations. Podcast can be a good option for almost any subject and industry. And it's really interesting having spoken to people here today. They said, well, I do this. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking they're going to say they'll never be interested in podcasts. I thought, I've often thought about starting a podcast, talking about what I do, but how do I make it interesting? Well, that's something that Podtalk will talk to you about and can develop with you. They're much more informal than written articles, much more accessible. Talking about accessibility, it's very important. There's a lot of written visual matter out there. And the audio market is big, and a lot of people prefer to access information that way. Not children, young people learn through listening rather than watching. Like I just said, the storytelling is immense. More UK adults than ever are listening to podcasts. Over 2/3 of people living in the United Kingdom, except for you, Robert, age 18 and over, have actually listened to a podcast, and 42% are monthly podcast listeners. 30% weekly. That is a massive amount of market if you're not using podcasts to promote what you do that you are missing out on. Weekly UK podcast listeners spend an average of 5 hours and 27 minutes listening in. That seems to me like a commute in and out, or doing a fitness or whatever. You're nodding at the back. Is that when you listen to yours? Yeah. Young adults are local consumers of podcasts. The majority of 18 to 13-year-olds are monthly podcast listeners, and 41% are weekly listeners, higher than the average UK adult. I'm loving this statistic because in lots of spheres that we work, we are trying very much to talk to the younger generations, and it's very hard sometimes to engage with them through, there's so many amounts of social media and influencers and all the rest of it, but actually they're listening to podcasts a lot. And it's the fastest growing market for that. So podcasts are an excellent way also to reach the 35 to 54-year-old market. That's your prime segment market with the most spending power. And about half of those are monthly listeners. So 34% are weekly listeners. And the 55 plus UK are getting better. They started off as the biggest segmentation of people listening to podcasts, and they've been way overtaken by everybody else. But they're getting back there. And I'm thinking, 55 plus, 55 is very, very, very young, I'd just like to say. But, so, when I think about my dad who's 90, I still tell him what we do and he still doesn't understand. But there you go. Interesting one here. It's 48% of black UK adults listen to podcasts each month, higher than the 42% overall. And 39% of UK Asian adults listen to podcasts each month. And here are the newcomers, the Gen Zs. Those people, they are just multiplying as podcast listeners. So if you're wanting to get your message through to that generation, then a podcast is a very, very favourable way to go on that. I'm not going to talk for ages because I just wanted to give you some stats, make you understand about how incredible the podcast space is, how brilliant it is for those. We work with lots of clients, And they have really noticed a difference in not only the relationship they have with their loyal customers, if you like, they've had for years and years, but they're making new ones. And when we're talking about, oh, well, how many people are listening to my podcast, you might go, how do you listen? And podcasts are counted in downloads and only in full downloads. So say you've done an episode for 25 minutes, that's being listened to. Never compare to saying, oh yes, but I've got 16 likes on my Facebook page, that's going to be much better. They are completely different and immeasurable to each other. And as you have all listened to a podcast and you understand the relationship you build with the host and the guest speakers, can you imagine if that had a brand attached to it and how much more loyal you'd feel towards using them or referring them? So we, as I just said, we work with lots of different organisations where we manage, produce, market. We do everything from intros and outros and music and show notes and script development and marketing and anything you need. All you need to do if you want to start up a podcast with our team is just be able to talk and have a guest. And we'll help you position your podcast in the market correctly for you, so you are a unique voice. And thank you very much. And let's just talk even more if you want to.
That was so hurt. I didn't want to go on for hours.
Thanks for listening to The Suffolk Pod Show. Find us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. Or you can visit our website, podtalk.co.uk. And here's our disclaimer.
The Suffolk Pod Show will not be held responsible for any omissions or errors in its podcast.
The Suffolk Pod Show is produced purely for entertainment purposes. Views and opinions are that of our own or that of our guests.